The Midnight Train. The station clock struck midnight as Ethan stepped onto the empty platform. His train was late. The air was thick with fog, curling around his legs like grasping fingers. A cold breeze sent a shiver down his spine. Then, from the distance, the train emerged. It was ancient, its black iron frame covered in rust. The windows were dark, but something inside shifted. The door slid open with a slow, painful screech. No conductor. No passengers. Just silence. Ethan hesitated, but he had no choice. His ticket crumpled in his hand as he stepped aboard. The door slammed shut behind him. The train lurched forward. He was no longer alone. Ethan walked down the aisle, scanning the rows of empty seats. The air inside was stale, tinged with an odd metallic scent. The only sound was the steady clatter of the train moving along the tracks. Then he heard it, a whisper, faint, distant. He turned sharply, but there was no one. The rows of seats stretched endlessly behind him, shadows flickering under the dim overhead lights. He took a shaky breath and moved forward, hoping to find another passenger, someone who could explain this eerie emptiness. But every car was the same, deserted, until he reached the last one. A single figure sat in the back, motionless, had covered their face, and their hands rested lifelessly on their lap. Ethan's throat tightened as he took a cautious step forward. "Excuse me, do you know where this train is headed?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, the whisper returned. Closer now, slithering through the air like a breeze that didn't belong. Ethan swallowed hard. The hooded figure lifted its head. Its face was missing. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding. The thing in the hood remained still, its empty visage staring at him. He turned and ran, gripping the cold metal of the train's walls as he stumbled through the cars. The train had changed. The windows no longer showed the outside world, just a swirling abyss of blackness. The lights flickered, casting grotesque shadows along the corridor. The whispering voices grew louder, forming words he couldn't understand. He tried the door. It wouldn't open. Desperate, he pounded against it. "Let me out!" he shouted, his voice swallowed by the endless hum of the train. Then a voice, clear and chilling, spoke from behind him. "You can't leave, Ethan." He turned. The hooded figure was gone, but something else was there, something waiting. A shadow loomed at the far end of the car, tall and gaunt. It wore a conductor's uniform, but its face was skeletal, its hollow eyes burning with an unnatural light. It stepped forward, the old floor creaking beneath its weight. "Ticket, please." Ethan's fingers shook as he reached for his ticket, offering it to the creature. The skeletal conductor took it, inspecting it with a bony hand. Then it smiled, a grin far too wide, stretching beyond the limits of its jaw. "You've paid your fare," it rasped. "Now enjoy the ride." The train shuddered. The lights dimmed. The whispering voices turned into screams. Ethan turned to run, but the aisle stretched impossibly long. The seats were no longer empty. Shadowy figures filled them. Their blank faces turned toward him. They whispered his name in unison, their voices hollow and ancient. "Ethan! Ethan! Ethan!" His breath hitched his hands, cold and weightless, brushed against his arms, his neck, his face. He swatted at them, but they passed through like mist. Then a sharp pain, a burning sensation on his wrist. He looked down. A number had appeared, branded into his skin. Passenger 1123. A realization struck him like ice water. He wasn't just on this train. He was part of it now. The skeletal conductor stepped closer, its grin widening. The train sped up, the world outside vanishing into complete darkness. Ethan let out a final scream as the whisper consumed him, pulling him into the void of the never-ending ride. And just like that, the train arrived at the next station. The door slid open with a slow, painful screech. A new passenger stepped aboard. Ethan tried to warn him, but no sound came out. His throat felt tight, his voice stolen. He turned his hands in horror. His fingers were fading, turning translucent like smoke. The new passenger, unaware of the nightmare ahead, took a hesitant step inside. The door slammed shut behind him. His expression turned to confusion, then fear. Ethan watched helplessly as a young man walked down the aisle, his form solidifying into the very shadowy figures he had seen before. A whisper echoed through the car. Passenger 1124. The train shuddered and moved forward, disappearing into the abyss once more. And Ethan finally understood. There was no escape.